The calculus instructor singled out the reserved woman seated in the last row, aiming to embarrass her before the entire class. Ms. Callahan, tackle this equation immediately, he commanded with a sly grin. Unbeknownst to him, Evelyn Callahan had been unraveling intricate mathematical problems since she was 12. As she stepped toward the chalkboard and grasped the chalk, a hush fell over the room. What followed would alter everything. Sunlight streamed through the high windows of Westmore University's math building, casting elongated shadows across the gleaming floors. Clutching her tattered leather notebook, Evelyn Callahan wove through the corridors, feeling distinctly out of place among students far younger than her. At 38, Evelyn stood apart in the crowd of 20. Something's hurrying to their classes. Her plain white blouse and muted gray sweater stood in stark contrast to the relaxed hoodies and stylish attire around her. For 2 decades, she had yearned for this opportunity, returning to complete what life had interrupted years ago. "Pardon me," she murmured, moving aside as a cluster of chattering students rushed by. None paid her any attention. The unnoticed middle-aged woman trying to fit in. Room 307, Advanced Calculus with Dr. Howard Garner. Taking a deep breath, Evelyn stepped inside. The lecture hall was formidable, with tiered seats facing a vast chalkboard already filled with complex formulas. She selected a seat near the front, organizing her notebooks with precision. "First day?" a young woman next to her asked with a warm smile. "First day back," Evelyn clarified, offering a faint smile. "It's been some time." Before they could continue, silence enveloped the room as Dr. Garner strode in. His reputation as a brilliant, exacting, and hard-to-please professor preceded him. His silver hair and impeccably tailored suit exuded authority, his sharp gaze scanning the room, as if evaluating who would endure his course. "Welcome to Advanced Calculus," his voice resonated effortlessly. "Look to your left, then your right. One of those individuals won't make it to midterms." A nervous laugh spread through the class. Evelyn sat motionless, her focus unwavering. "This isn't basic math," Dr. Garner went on, inscribing an equation on the board with fluid strokes. "This is where we distinguish those who enjoy math from those who truly grasp it." His gaze settled on Evelyn, lingering just long enough to unsettle her. She knew that look, the one doubting her place, questioning if she belonged in this room. As Dr. Garner began his lecture, Evelyn's pen glided across her notebook, capturing his words while jotting corrections, alternative methods, and links to theoretical ideas he hadn't touched on in the margins. Abruptly, Dr. Garner halted, fixing his eyes on Evelyn Callahan. "Evelyn Callahan," she answered, her voice calm despite her pounding heart. "Ms. Callahan, do you find fault with my method?" He'd noticed her writing independently of his lecture. "No, sir. Just taking notes," she replied. His lips pursed, his eyes narrowing slightly. "I see. Well, Miss Callahan, perhaps you'd care to present your notes to the class tomorrow." The condescension in his tone was unmistakable. Evelyn gave a single nod, aware that the challenge had just begun. By the end of the first week, Evelyn had settled into a routine, arriving early, reviewing prior notes, and bracing for Dr. Garner's increasingly targeted questions. "You were in insurance, correct?" he asked one morning, glancing at her enrollment details. "Accounting," Evelyn corrected softly. "For a manufacturing firm." Quite a jump to advanced theoretical math, he remarked, his tone implying the gap was too wide. Whispers began circulating among the students, speculating about her presence and what had drawn her back to academia at her age. Evelyn tuned them out, focusing instead on the graceful interplay of numbers and theories she'd cherished since childhood. In the faculty lounge, Dr. Harriet Powell overheard colleagues discussing the older student in Garner's class. Howard seems intent on pushing her out, Professor Jenkins remarked, stirring his coffee. Harriet's brow furrowed. That's hardly just. Has he even given her an opportunity? You know Howard. Jenkins replied with a shrug. Has already decided who fits in his classroom before the term begins. Later that day, Harriet spotted Evelyn alone in the math library, immersed in advanced texts far beyond the course's scope. Intrigued, she approached. Heavy reading for the first week? She noted, eyeing titles on non-Euclidean geometry and complex analysis. Evelyn glanced up, slightly startled. Oh, just brushing up. It's been a while since I tackled Dr. Powell's differential equations. Harriet extended her hand. Evelyn Callahan. They shook hands. You're in Howard's class. How's it going? Evelyn's polite smile betrayed nothing. It's demanding, as it ought to be. Harriet studied her briefly. You know, we have a faculty colloquium next week. Grad students sometimes attend. You might enjoy it. Thank you, but I'm not sure Dr. Garner would approve. I'm inviting you, Harriet said with a smile. Tuesday, 4 p.m., Math Hall. Back in class, Dr. Garner seemed resolute in finding Evelyn's limits. His questions to her grew more intricate, his responses to her answers sharp and dismissive. Ms. Callahan, perhaps you could clarify for the class where you're struggling with this concept. It might aid others too timid to admit their confusion. Evelyn met his gaze directly. I grasped the concept, Dr. Garner. I was merely exploring a different approach to the proof. His eyebrows lifted slightly. A different approach. How original. The sarcasm was evident to all. I'd be eager to hear it. Tomorrow, perhaps. The challenge lingered between them. Evelyn nodded once, knowing this was the moment he'd been anticipating, a chance to expose her inadequacy publicly. I'll be ready, she said quietly. That Tuesday afternoon, Evelyn sat in the back of Math Hall, listening as faculty presented their latest research. Dr. Powell, noticing her arrival, gave a subtle nod of recognition. Most attendees were graduate students, clustered in small groups, occasionally casting curious glances at the unfamiliar face. Dr. Garner, the final speaker, discussed his work on multidimensional calculus applications. Evelyn listened closely, her notebook open, occasionally noting observations. She spotted a minor inefficiency in his method. Not something that undermined his findings, but a refinement opportunity. As the session ended and attendees mingled over coffee, Evelyn considered slipping out quietly. Powell intercepted her. What did you think? She asked, nodding toward Dr. Garner, who was surrounded by admiring grad students. It was intriguing, Evelyn replied diplomatically, but Harriet's perceptive gaze prompted Evelyn to hesitate. His integration sequence was conventional. You see a better way, Harriet prompted. Before Evelyn could elaborate, Dr. Garner approached, his expression cooling upon seeing her. Ms. Callahan, what a surprise. Undergraduates rarely attend these events. I invited her. Dr. Powell interjected smoothly. Evelyn was just sharing thoughts on your integration sequence. Dr. Garner's smile tightened. Was she now? And what groundbreaking insights has Ms. Callahan, with her vast accounting experience, uncovered? The condescension was palpable. quieting nearby conversations as onlookers turned to watch. I only noted that the tertiary function could be streamlined. Evelyn said softly. It would cut down computational steps significantly. Dr. Garner's laugh was brief and dismissive. If it could be streamlined, don't you think someone would have done so in the decades this method has been taught? Someone with more than a week of advanced calculus training. Harriet frowned. Howard. No, it's fine, he continued, his eyes challenging Evelyn. This is perfect timing.
Ms.
Callahan was set to share her novel approach tomorrow. Perhaps she'd like to enlighten us now. The room grew uncomfortably silent. Graduate students exchanged glances, some awkward, others intrigued. Evelyn felt her cheeks flush, part of her wanting to flee the hostile scrutiny. But a stronger part, the one that had solved complex equations late at night, after her daughter was asleep, the one that never stopped learning despite life's interruptions, held firm. If there's a chalkboard available, she said evenly, I'd be glad to show you. Dr. Garner's smile was predatory. Please, go ahead. The next day, the atmosphere in room 307 was charged. News of the colloquium confrontation had spread rapidly. Students whispered as they settled into their seats, glancing between Dr. Garner, standing stiffly at the podium, and Evelyn, quietly reviewing her notes. Before today's lecture, Dr. Garner declared, his voice sharp, Ms. Callahan has offered to present her alternative approach to a standard integration sequence. The word offered elicited students aware of the true events. Miss Callahan, the board is yours. He gestured with exaggerated politeness. Evelyn rose, clutching her notes, feeling every gaze as she walked to the front. Her heart pounded, but her hands were steady. This was her domain. Numbers and equations had always made sense, even when life didn't. Facing the class, she saw sympathy in some eyes, skepticism in others, and amusement in a few. In the doorway, Dr. Powell stood quietly observing. Dr. Garner sat at his desk, arms crossed. Whenever you're ready, Miss Callahan, enlighten us. Evelyn turned to the board and began. Her handwriting was precise, methodical, as she outlined the standard method first, explaining each step clearly. Then she paused, chalk in hand. The conventional approach requires 12 operations, she said, her voice gaining strength. But by rethinking the function's relationships, we can simplify. She worked through her method, the chalk moving confidently, charting a path few had considered. The room's initial skepticism shifted to focus, then fascination. Dr. Garner's smug expression wavered as Evelyn's solution unfolded. He leaned forward, scrutinizing her work for flaws, but finding none, his frown deepening. This can't be correct, he interrupted. You've omitted critical steps. I haven't omitted them, Evelyn replied calmly. I've made them unnecessary by redefining the variable's relationships. She continued, explaining as she went. From the doorway, Powell's slight smile acknowledged the elegant solution. A student in the front whispered to his neighbor, Is she right? I think so, came the stunned reply. Evelyn finished, circling her result, 7 operations instead of 12, with the same outcome. She set the chalk down and faced Dr. Garner. The standard method is effective, of course. This is just another perspective. Silence blanketed the room. Dr. Garner rose slowly, his face unreadable, and approached the board, inspecting Evelyn's work intensely. The class held its breath. This approach, he said at last, his voice taut, though unconventional, seems to yield the correct result. He turned to Evelyn. "Where did you learn this method, Ms. Callahan?" "I didn't learn it," she replied steadily. "I devised it." Whispers rippled through the room.
The doctor.
Garner's eyebrows rose slightly. "Devised it?" His tone remained doubtful. Such innovation usually stems from years of specialized study. "Yes," Evelyn agreed quietly. "It does." Dr. Powell stepped into the room. "Howard, may I?" Without waiting, she addressed the class. Ms. Callahan's demonstration mirrors in approach in a paper from last year's Journal of Mathematical Analysis. A paper that stirred a field with its streamlined computational methods. Students sat up, eyes flicking between the three figures. That paper, Dr. Powell continued, was published under the pseudonym E.C. Reynolds, an author behind 6 influential papers over the past decade, whose identity remained unknown. Dr. Garner's expression shifted from doubt to confusion. Then, realization, as he looked at Evelyn. "You're claiming to be E.C. Reynolds." Evelyn nodded once, unflinching. "I published anonymously. Without credentials, my work wouldn't have been taken seriously." A student in the back raised her hand hesitantly. "Wait, E.C. Reynolds. My thesis advisor had us study those papers. They're seen as the future of computational theory." "I've read them too. They're brilliant." Dr. Garner, usually eloquent, seemed momentarily speechless. His gaze moved from Evelyn to her solution on the board, elegant in its simplicity. "Why are you here?" he asked, genuine puzzlement in his voice. "If you're E.C. Reynolds, you could be teaching, not sitting in my class." "Because I want credentials to match my knowledge." Evelyn answered simply. "Because my daughter now has her shot at college, and it's my turn. Because I've spent 20 years learning in stolen moments, and I want to do it right." The room fell silent as her words sank in. Dr. Powell smiled faintly, watching Dr. Garner grapple with his biases in real time. "Well," he said at last, adjusting his tie, "it seems we have much to discuss, Ms. Callahan." A word of Evelyn Callahan, the unassuming returning student revealed as the enigmatic E.C. Reynolds, spread swiftly through Westmar's math department. By the next week, faculty and graduate students were abuzz with the story. Dr. Garner's demeanor toward Evelyn shifted subtly but noticeably. His probing questions, once meant to expose flaws, became thoughtful inquiries. His dismissive tone softened to something approaching professional respect, though pride kept him from fully softening. "Ms. Callahan," he said after Friday's lecture, "I've been reviewing your paper on nonlinear differential equations. I'd like to discuss a section on page 42 if you're available." Students exchanged looks as Evelyn nodded. The professor who had sought to shame her was now seeking her expertise. After class, a group of students approached Evelyn's desk. "Yes, Callahan." A young woman with glasses said nervously, "I'm struggling with last week's material. Some of us have a study group. Could you join us to explain it?" Evelyn smiled warmly. "Of course. When do you meet?" In the faculty lounge, Dr. Powell found Dr. Garner gazing thoughtfully out the window. "You're not the first to misjudge her, Howard," she said, pouring coffee. "But you might be the first to admit it." He frowned slightly. "I haven't admitted anything." "Your demeanor says otherwise," Harriet replied, smiling. "The way you speak to her now, the fact that you're reading her work, it's almost like you respect her." "She's operated at an advanced level without formal training," he admitted grudgingly. "That's notable." It's extraordinary, Harriet corrected. And she did it while raising a child alone and working full time. Garner's frown deepened. Why tell me this? Because she'll need a thesis advisor next year. Someone who can push her, whose endorsement carries weight. He raised an eyebrow. You're suggesting me, after I tried to drive her out of my class. Exactly because of that, Harriet replied. You've confronted your biases, and you're still the best in the department for her research areas. In the days that followed, Evelyn found herself in a surprising role. Students sought her help, sat near her in class, and invited her into their discussions. Faculty who once overlooked her now stopped to introduce themselves. Dr. Garner watched from afar as the woman he'd dismissed as an out-of-place amateur became a pivotal figure in his classroom's academic dynamic. During one session, as Evelyn patiently clarified a complex theorem for struggling students, he realized he might have something to learn from her after all. 3 weeks later, Dr. Garner stood before the department's curriculum committee, proposing changes for the spring semester. Evelyn, invited as a special consultant for her dual perspective as a student and published researcher, sat among the faculty. The traditional sequence has served us well, Dr. Garner concluded, but recent innovations suggest we may be limiting our students by not adopting more efficient computational methods. He glanced briefly at Evelyn. Dr. Jenkins, the department chair, leaned forward. Correct me if I'm wrong, Howard, but aren't you proposing we adopt the E.C. Reynolds approach? The one you called amateur speculation last year. A few uneasy chuckles filled the room. Dr. Garner cleared his throat. I've reassessed my stance based on new evidence, he said stiffly. Academic integrity requires us to follow the research, regardless of personal views or biases. Dr. Powell added softly. The meeting ended with tentative approval for Dr. Garner's proposed changes. As faculty dispersed, he approached Evelyn, who was collecting her notes. Ms. Callahan, a word. She looked up, her expression neutral. Yes, Professor. The department is hosting a symposium next month on innovative calculus instruction. Your perspective would be valuable. Evelyn studied him. Are you asking me to present with faculty? I'm asking you to co-present with me. He clarified, the words clearly challenging for him. Your practical insights complement my theoretical work. The gesture was more than professional courtesy. It was a public recognition of her expertise, an integration into the academic community that had initially spurned her. That afternoon, Evelyn led her first official student help session, which had grown from an informal gathering to include nearly half of Dr. Garner's class. The key isn't memorizing formulas, she told the attentive group, but understanding how functions relate. As she guided them through complex problems, Evelyn felt a quiet fulfillment. This was the dream she'd nurtured during late nights at her kitchen table, solving advanced math by lamplight. After her daughter slept. From the hallway, Dr. Garner briefly observed the session. The woman he'd tried to discredit was now teaching his students, often explaining his material more effectively than he did. He turned away, a reluctant smile forming. Howard Garner rarely admitted errors, but he knew when he'd been bested, mathematically and otherwise. 6 months later, Evelyn stood before a packed lecture hall in the math building. The departmental colloquium, featuring the newly revealed E.C. Reynolds, drew faculty and students from across the university. Dr. Garner sat in the front row, watching as she confidently presented her latest research. Her clear explanations and intuitive approaches captivated even non-specialists. By reimagining these relationships, she concluded, we unlock new avenues for theoretical and practical exploration. The applause was immediate and heartfelt. As questions began heartfelt, Garner noted the respect in his colleagues' voices when addressing her. No one doubted her place anymore. Her brilliance had secured it. After the session, Dr. Garner approached her at the podium. "Congratulations, Evelyn," he said, using her first name for the first time. "That was expertly delivered." "Thank you, Howard," she replied with a small smile. He hesitated, then continued. "I owe you an apology. My initial judgment of you was—" He paused, searching for the word. "Mistaken," she suggested. "Profoundly mistaken," he admitted. "I let assumptions cloud my perspective." Evelyn regarded him briefly. "In math, we adjust our hypotheses when new evidence emerges. It's not a failure. It's part of the process." "A generous view of my actions," he noted wryly. "I've had practice being underestimated," she replied. "It taught me to value those who can rethink their assumptions." As they walked to his office to discuss her thesis proposal, Garner realized his most significant lesson that year hadn't come from a textbook or paper, but from the quiet woman he'd wrongly tried to discredit. If this story resonated with you, remember that brilliance takes many forms. Have you ever been underestimated or seen someone's hidden talents shine? Share your stories in the comments. Let us know where you're watching from. Subscribe for more inspiring tales that remind us never to judge a book by its cover, or a mathematician by her quiet presence.